Welcome to the Leadership After Hours podcast. We're committed to driving the modern leadership revolution forward. Be sure to go subscribe right now. You don't want to miss out on a single leadership lesson. Together, we will unlock our own greatness and create organizations that drive both fulfillment and profitability.
Green Beret Commander, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and entrepreneur, Sean Patton is your Leadership After Hours podcast host. Real talk with real leaders. Presented by Stronger Leaders, Stronger Profits.
Welcome to Leadership After Hours podcast. I am Sean Patton, and I am joined today by Debra Sunderland, who is a conscious leadership expert, coach, speaker, author, all those things. And I've had the privilege to know and work with Debra for a while now. And so I was very excited and honored that she was coming on the podcast to talk with me today. So thanks for being here, Debra.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. I'm totally excited.
Well, so let's just dive right into it. And, what brought you to this the concept of conscious leadership?
Yeah. That could be a really long story, so I'll try and make it as short as possible. Basically, it was probably the scariest time of my life where I wasn't supposed to live. And waking up out of a coma and a severe brain injury, where I was told by the doctors I wasn't supposed to live, I had a second chance at life. And as I was contemplating, why the heck am I here in this world? I realized that my life was more than winning and achieving. And that was the very last thought I had before I almost died was, I'm going to podium today. I'm going to win in my cycling race. And I realized that my whole life had been about winning, being the best. I didn't tell myself that. I just did that. And so I realized that my whole life of trying to achieve and be the best and win was exhausting and also anxiety producing, because it was always on to the next win and to the next win. And there wasn't this peaceful state in my mind. And so lying in the bed after I got out of my coma and in the hospital for a month and learning how to walk, talk, and cut my food again, I realized that God, the universe, was asking me to do something else, to look at life differently, to look at my business differently. And so basically what I said was, okay, God, why am I here? And I would say 8 months later, after I was finally cleared to drive my car again, my beautiful children were 16 and 11 at the time, and we lived in a suburb of Chicago. And my answer came to me of what am I supposed to be doing with my life? I was dropping off my son at the train, and my little girl was in the back watching him get on the train with all these beautifully dressed people going to work. And she says, Mama, why does everyone look so unhappy getting on the train going to work? And it was like a dagger in my heart because it was painful. I could relate to that. I knew that. I had experienced that for 20 years of being in the business world. This not a joyful place. This not a peaceful place. This stressful place. And all I could do was agree with her. And so I dropped her off, went back home, about to get on my bike. Now this is 8 months after my accident. And my aha came to me. And the thought I had was, thank God I almost died doing something I love doing, racing my bike. And I was awesome at it. These dear precious people getting on the train every day are dying a slow death doing what they don't want to do. I'm here to wake them up. And most importantly, I'm here to wake up the most successful people, because those who have the most suffer the most. That was the thought I had. And I believe when we have a calling and a purpose, things come together. Now, I didn't know what conscious leadership meant. I didn't know how I was going to touch these leaders. And I just knew that's what I was supposed to do. And then lo and behold, across the country, Vermont and Colorado, someone connects me to this book that wasn't even in print yet called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And so I read the intro alone and I said, this is the answer. This is the answer for me. This is the answer how I want to live. This is the answer for how I want to braise up, coach people, And so I reached out to the founder, who happened to be in Chicago, and started studying with him for years and got certified in it. And that's really how that all came about.
Wow. It's so interesting. When a few years ago, when I was transitioning out of the military and decided I was going to go, actually, I'd gone through a couple of businesses, decided I was going to coach and go into that, and decided to, write a book on mindset and started really questioning and codifying these different beliefs that I had picked up and why I did certain things and how I could put that into a format. And it really forced me to start to formalize that question of, that why am I here? What am I going to do with my life? And I think a driver for me since I was a teenager, and I've had people not believe me on this, but literally as a teenager, I just started learning more about the world. And I've always been a newsie. So I was always like reading, there was, violence in Israel and all these places. And I was like, okay, I don't know if I'll ever figure out like some objective why, like why we're here, how we got here. Like, it seems like that may be a bridge too far, but I know that I have a limited amount of time and I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life, but I know I want to make it count, right? I want to maximize it. And so that started my process. And what I found when I started working my book and codifying things is I had this underlying assumption that everyone else was going through this self-questioning existential thought process, just like, of course, everyone's trying to like maximize their life and figure out what to do. And then as I started working with people, I realized I didn't find that to be a common thing. And so I'm just wondering, what is your thought? Why don't, if you agree with that, why don't more people actually face that question or try to answer it?
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And I know a little bit about your journey as a leader, protecting us in our country. And I can only imagine the things that you've seen that many of us haven't and won't ever. And I think it's sometimes takes something hard for us to wake up to when we see death or when we experience a near death or where we experience major loss, that there's this jostling of getting us out of a coma. Like I really was living a life in a coma until I was put in a physical coma and came out of it. And I was like, what have I been doing with my whole life? And so I just think that we kind of just go along and listen to what we're told, no blame or shame, no right or wrong. Like as little ones, our parents telling us, trying to do the best they can to keep us safe, trying to help us grow into who they think we should be. And the same with our teachers, they're taught the same thing. And so the teachers teach us. And then I think we just kind of fall into what we're expected or to do, or what we see as being successful, and we want to be successful, and we don't question the journey of success. We just check the boxes kind of mindlessly and unfulfilled. At least that was for me, because it was always on to the next thing. And so yes, I think that is not common for people to question until there is a huge wake up. And that's why I do this work, is because I don't want to have people, if I can save one person from having to have a hard wake up call, I want to have that opportunity. And it's interesting because since my wake up and my almost tragic ending of my life, I will stand at a boardroom and very intentionally look at each person in the eyes and go around the room and look at them and say it from my heart, because I totally believe this, that they are created like no other in all of history to live at such a time as this, that they have a calling and a purpose on their life, that there's no one that can be them. And they look at me like it's the first time they've ever heard that. And that's what's, I think you know this, like I'm in the midst of writing another book, and it's this consciousness of waking up to who I'm called to be. And I always say my genius is seeing yours. My life was spared to wake you up to yours. is that space of calling and purpose, who we're called to be, even at work, that we have a genius that no one else can fulfill. And so I coined, instead of leadership, it's a deeper sense of being called geniusship, where people lead from their genius. They lead their life that way. They lead their relationships that way. They lead their business that way. And I want people to believe that they are a genius. And what I hear from so many people, I have a genius dinner and I invite CEOs to it. And the very first thing they say to me is, I'm not a genius. And I'm like, yes, you are. You know? And I think it's this sense that people tamp themselves down. They push their brilliance down. They push their, like, they are told they must be humble or have humility. And I'm not saying that we're not to have that, but they don't let their brilliance shine. And we are called to shine. We are called to sparkle and all sparkling together like a bunch of stars. And the only way we could do that is to be our light shining in our star, right? And to know that. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's a long answer.
No, I agree. And, something that resonated with me was, I think a lot of times people say, well, I'm not a genius. They're comparing, they're looking at maybe someone else they consider to be a genius in an area or an expert or, and what they're really seeing is like, they're comparing, are they a genius in that person's genius, right? Like they're judging themselves against someone else's genius instead of the self-discovery of like, what is my own, individual genius. And I love the way you phrase that with your geniusship stuff, because I'm a firm believer that, the way I had previously addressed this topic was my North Star theory, which is applied that says every living creature, humans included, and most especially probably, but every living creature is its happiest, most content and fulfilled when its activities and environment are aligned with its genetic purpose, like finding purpose. So finding alignment, and you've refined that down. I kind of use it more generically, like we as human beings are communal creatures and therefore experience fulfillment by impacting others, not ourselves. Mm-hmm. But I love that I feel like you took it that next level down of saying, okay, so now let's find out, yes, your fulfillment is going to come from impacting others, but also alignment with what is your kind of your inner purpose and aligning your activities and environment at a more individual level instead of just like a species level. So I think that's really interesting. So so someone's bought into this, right? They've heard us talk for the last 10 minutes. They're like, all right, I'm in, I'm ready to do it. So that's always something that I've struggled too with clients is like, I can give them the theory behind that and say, well, we just got to figure out what that is. How do you help them discover what that alignment, that geniusship alignment is for them?
Yeah. So, I first work with them to help them see how they've covered themselves up. We all tend to put these layers of protection and defenses, images, false identities, so that we can be accepted, win, be loved, belong. We don't do it intentionally, it's unconsciously. And so using the conscious leadership tools, I start to work with them around their belief system and what is their unconscious belief system. And our unconscious belief system for all of us is to be in defense, is to be protected, is to go along to get along, is not to ruffle the feathers. And so I start to help them peel back, like, tell me when you don't have peace. Tell me when you're frustrated. Tell me where you're sad. Tell me where you're scared, because our emotions are so intelligent. And so I have worked with Dan Goleman at Harvard on emotional intelligence, and that's something that we also push down, and that's our wisdom into who we are, into who we're called to be. And so we work on first peeling back the defenses, peeling back the frustrations, peeling back the layers, and Also, that's coupled with an inner want that we have, a desire. I believe our purpose matches the desire in our heart. And many times we don't trust our desire in our heart, or we think we can't have it, or we think it's not possible to have work that matches our desire. And so we push it away. So as we peel back the onion of coverings, is to start to listen to, what is the heart saying? What is your heart? Where is it light up? What's easy for you to do in life and in work? What could you be doing forever and not even like feel like your energy's drained, right? But many times people don't know that even just that simple thing, because they're running and doing all the tasks to fit in, belong, or achieve. And so it's a gradual unfolding. And then you know this already because you and I just did this yesterday, is the Enneagram is a tool that I really love coupling with consciousness, because the Enneagram is our type, the 1 through 9 typing system, and we fall into one of the 9 types. It's the box we put ourselves in order to be accepted, loved, seen, and be enough in the world. And it has a very specific motivation, each type, on how it sees the world, how it acts in the world, and how we integrate into all 9 types is our wholeness. So understanding how we leave our wholeness and the Enneagram type that we are, that it actually brings us to leaving our wholeness. So that's the other tool that I use. Because if we can't know our motivation, we can't change our behaviors permanently. And we can't know ourselves. So it's not about right or wrong or our motivation or our doings. It's the motivation inside that leads us to what we're doing. And so we must know what's driving me. And unconsciously, it's always out of fear, right? And fear limits our genius. Fear limits our wholeness. So I teach people, how do you love yourself? That's the only thing that's the opposite of fear, is love. So how do you love yourself when you're afraid? How do you love yourself when something isn't as you hoped it to be in the world, and you find yourself being triggered? Because if we meet those feelings with just that we're just human, just like everyone else, and we're on this journey together, that gives an open space for ourselves. And I'll tell you one last thing. When I work with these dear CEOs, there's 3 questions eventually that I will ask them. 1, do you believe you're enough? Without doing anything, without getting somewhere, just right here, right now, do you believe as a person, as a being, that you are enough? Number 2, do you believe you have enough right now? Do you really have enough? Food, shelter, clothing, love. Do you have just the basics? Do you have enough? And number 3 is, do you know how to love yourself? Those 3 questions, sadly, no one has answered yes to any of those questions. And it breaks my heart. And I believe it's just because we've got lost and come away from ourselves in the world and not checking in with ourselves and looking outside of ourselves for answers, looking outside of ourselves for feeling better or not, and coming inward and to really ask oneself, who am I? Who am I called to be? How am I enough? How can I accept myself as being enough? Because we aren't taught that, right? What does that really look like? So those are some of the things that we work on.
Yeah, that's awesome. You brought up, again, I'm sort of picking up some of the issues, or being in the same sort of like coaching development area, mindset, right? These things we think about, and you and I, it's like our world we live in. And to your point, conscious leadership, consciousness, I think answers the bill on a lot of these things and really has it dialed in. Because one thing that I'm working with, so my clients too, I say, like you mentioned, what do you do that gives you energy, right? Like that doesn't steal from you, but that you actually get energy by doing the work. And that's a good indication to head that way. But when you look at that more holistically, you mentioned, and tell me if I'm misunderstanding or misquoting, but that just because of our natural state, you almost start with the negative. Like where do you have anxiety? Where do you have fear? Where do you have like, because is that because that's just easier to identify than what do I love? And so you have to kind of work through the negative to get to the positive.
I think so I don't look at things as negative or positive. I just look at them as they are.
Okay.
And unconsciously, which we're 96 to 98%, all of us unconscious most of the time. And in that state of unconsciousness, we are motivated by defense, and it is a toxic fear for all of us. And so getting to that, what is under that toxic ball? Is it mostly anger? Is it mostly sadness? Is it mostly fear? And I mean, it's toxic when we don't feel it all the way through our body. When we feel our feelings all the way through, it only lasts up to 90 seconds, but we haven't been taught to do that. Me, you, and the rest of the world, we are like, don't feel your feelings, push them down, or don't say them at work because that's not the place to say them. And right. And so we've learned to so until we can really understand what we've pushed down inside of us and let that out, right? Because it's like a hose when you go out to water your flowers and you notice the water's not coming out fully on that hose. Oh, well, it's because the patio chair is like stepping on it and it's kinking it. And that's really like how our emotions are. Like we can only feel so much joy if we don't feel all of our feelings. And so that's why what I'm going after is like, where are you not feeling your feelings and how is it coming up as triggers? Because that's what triggers are. Triggers are when we stuff down our feelings and something outside of us, a memory, is triggered by something outside of us in a current moment. It has nothing to do with someone outside of us or situation. It's a memory that we have, and it's connected to a trigger. And so it brings up that little stuffing down of emotion, and we think it's out there. And if that could just change out there, then we'll be okay. But it's because we haven't dealt with or seen or loved and let go and released the memory, the pattern that goes with the memory and the emotion. So that's kind of like why we start to clear that out.
So when we first, I love that. When I think it was the first time, at least I was with a conscious leadership group at your house. You asked us this question, and now you're on the podcast, so I get to turn it around on you. So, what is conscious leadership to you?
Conscious leadership is being really present to how you lead yourself. What are your own thoughts that trigger your own emotions, that trigger your own senses in your body, that trigger your behaviors, and being aware of that, not just being on autopilot. It's being present to how I'm showing up in the world. It's being present to, am I choosing how I want to create my day, or am I being reactive? So leading yourself and how you want to show up in the world, how you want to show up with your partner, how you want to show up with your kids, how you want to show up with your work partner or your client or whatever that is. It's a choice. And unconscious leadership isn't a choice. It's just reactive the whole time, which we call in the victim, villain, or hero modality. And so consciousness is the opportunity to create whatever life you want. It's a space of freedom and choice. It's an empowerment to create that.
Yeah, I think that what I love about consciousness and conscious leadership too, as I continue to learn more, is, again, before I was maybe exposed to the concepts, I always described it as, self-leadership has to come before, leading others. And that's something that's like, I've always believed and valued and been taught. But I love the emphasis on that self-awareness and that realization. It's what I'm hearing from you is you have to choose how to be and show up for yourself in the world. And that comes from self-knowledge. Mm-hmm. And then you can start having impact in the external world in the way that you want.
Yeah. And I think knowing, as a conscious leader, knowing that we're not better or different than anyone else, that we're all wired the same, that we have this small part of our brain, the amygdala, that wants to protect and keep us safe in a box. And when we make our decisions from that place, whether it's, do I want to have pizza? Do I want to go on a date with this person? Whatever our decisions are, it's noticing, am I making them from a conscious place or a fear reactive space? Because that's scarcity, and that's going to give us a very different outcome. And so when I work with leaders and even myself, when I get a result I don't want, or I can't seem to get the results I do want, I go backwards and I ask myself, so a conscious leader is going to get curious about, let's go backwards. Like, what was I thinking that brought my feeling, that brought my behavior, that brought my belief, that led me to this? And how is this a pattern in my life, in my relationships, where I'm not getting the results I want, right? There's a pattern that we all have to keep ourselves safe. And so if we're not conscious, what do we typically do when we don't get a result we want? We blame ourselves. Mm-hmm. We blame ourselves. We blame someone else. We blame the world. Woe is me. I can't have this. What's wrong with them? And then blaming doesn't get us anywhere. It makes us feel icky. We feel disempowered and we stay stuck. So it's the only way to get unstuck, right? Is to come back and look at self, right? In a loving, kind way. Mm-hmm.
You know, one phrase that you talk about a lot, or you bring up, is how excellence is killing us. So what do you mean when you say that? What do you mean by saying excellence is killing us?
Yeah, so this is like the overachiever of excellence speaking, right? It's our country is built on winning. And no blame or shame, like, we're winners, we're doers, we get things done, we make things happen, we help the world. And when we focus on just winning, that isn't purpose-filled, that isn't coupled with our genius fulfilling our excellence, it's an empty, mindless, depleting state of being. It will exhaust us. And just to achieve excellence, can be depressing. And I find this, dare I say, with CEOs who've gotten to the top, but it's never enough. And they finally take their life because they don't know where else to go. Or these beautiful athletes. When I was a cyclist and I raced, there was someone slightly younger than me right after my accident. She won a silver medal in the Olympics as a cyclist, as a racer. And she was in Stanford getting her master's in math, and she ended up taking her life. And it's, when I say this, it's the pandemic of people achieving and winning, but they're miserable inside. And they find no other way to give themselves fulfillment but that thing outside of them. And they're drained and they find that it's too much and they can't do it anymore. And the suicide rate has continued to elevate, especially in the United States. We have the most, more than any other country, but yet we're suffering the most. And so we need to look at that. Like students, overachieving students. This happened on my street. Probably 10 years ago when I lived in Chicago. I was in San Diego. I flew home and there were white ribbons around the trees everywhere. And I said, oh no, what happened? And a boy who was a freshman going into a sophomore year at University of Michigan took his life. And the reason he took his life, he had everything. He could have gone into the, semi-pros in baseball. He decided to go play at University of Michigan. He got sick, got mono, wasn't able to play, and felt miserable. And like his purpose was taken from him, right? And so excellence could be just about getting this thing, but it doesn't have purpose. And when we think it's purpose filled and it's not, it's very disappointing. And that's what kills the inside of us.
Yeah, that is And that's something that I struggle with and resonate on, being an Enneagram 3, as we've talked in our sessions. And so, as I look at the different components in the 15 commitments, one thing that we've talked about a few times and has really resonated with me is commitment 10, which is, could the opposite be true? And I've seen that be powerful for others. So for someone who, does push themselves and at least historically has pulled some self-worth or whatever from achievement, but you're right. I mean, once that goes, you got to do the next thing. It's not actually fulfilling. But questioning, do I need that? Do I need that fear? Do I need that drive? Do I need that accomplishment? Do I need that fear to drive me toward that accomplishment to actually do what I want to do in life or be happy? Or could I let go of that and still live the life I want to live and achieve? And I found that to be a really powerful question. Could the opposite be true for myself? And I've seen it for others as well. I don't know what's been your experience using that particular tool?
Yeah. So that's a very quick, so what happens is when we don't think there's another way, like we must achieve in order to feel good or fit in, or we got to be excellent at it, and questioning, well, do I really need to? Could I be enough if I don't do X, Y, Z? What if I sat and rested for half of a day? Would that be okay? And the reason we do the shift of asking the opposite is because it gives us a space of curiosity. Curiosity gives us the opportunity then to think of other options. Typically, we're not curious people. We're just doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, which we know Einstein says is insanity, right? We do more of the same thing and we're exhausted. We're like, well, why didn't we get the result? Because we have the same thought. We have the same perspective. We have the same behavior. We have the same feelings. So once we ask ourselves, well, could the opposite be true? It immediately brings us into possibilities. And that's what we need. Now, actually shifting to the other possibilities is frightening. It's frightening for the fearful mind, especially if you've been an excellence overachiever your whole life. It takes a while to bust through to something new because the ego, the small part of our brain, does not want something new. It is terrified for you to actually get out of your box. But until we face our fear and feel it all the way through, we will stay in our box. We will not step into the new thing. So we always want to welcome the fear as our teacher, as our friend, and feel it all the way through so that we can get to the other side, to taking that very next step that we might never take if we don't face the fear.
When you talk, or let's talk, my audience here at the podcast is generally senior or rising leaders inside businesses, or maybe business owners themselves. And they're obviously, if they're listening, they're interested in leadership development, that sort of thing. So you're talking to someone who is in a position of power within an organization, and they know, or at least they're convinced that they need to or should invest in their people and the development of their leaders and the people on their team. But if you just Google search that, my God, right? You'd be 12 pages deep of all the different options and different ways to address what's the best way to develop my people. Mm-hmm. Why should they choose conscious leadership as the direction to go?
Yeah. So, couple of things. We want to build teams of trust. And the only way we can build trust is for people to take responsibility, not less than or more than their responsibility. Meaning, if I'm a leader who gets anxious because someone on my team isn't going to do it the way I want or do it as quickly as I want, and I step in and do it for them, that's automatically saying to that team member, I don't trust you. And then that person unconsciously thinks they don't trust me. So I don't need to really try as hard because they're going to step in and do it anyway. And then around and around they go. And there's this lack of trust, frustration, misunderstanding. So when we talk about conscious leadership, we look at I am responsible for my thinking, my emotions, my behavior, and I want to hold a space for someone else to be responsible for themselves and what they're creating. And how do we learn together about our responsibilities? And every time I step in, that's taking away the opportunity for someone to grow and develop. Because the way that we grow and develop is by learning something that might not work or might not be the way we want it, right? That's the way we learn. But every time a leader is afraid and he steps in and, oh no, this is too important, I can't have them mess up. So that person isn't going to learn. And so what happens is that person comes back to the leader and says over and over again, how do I do this again? And then the leader's like, well, I told you a gazillion times. Why are you, they're frustrated, but they haven't given them the opportunity to practice. So that's one thing. We want to build trust. And we want to, the word I really dislike in the work world is accountability. I hate it because no one wants to be managed or held accountable. They want to be trusted and they want to have opportunity to grow. That's what they want. But every time we say accountability, it's not responsibility because as leaders, we don't have time to check in on people. We want to make radical, impeccable agreements with one another. So I teach impeccability through consciousness. So when we use impeccability, we have 4 questions that we ask each other, ask ourselves and ask the other. One is, let's just say you, Sean, you want something done by 6:00 today. You want a pizza delivered. Okay. And so you say, hey, Debra, can you get me a pizza by the end of the day? Well, I don't know what it is, what kind of pizza you want, what do you want on it, where do you want me to order it from, and what the heck is end of day, right? So number 1 is for you to say, I'm just saying how we want to build consciousness is by being fully aware of what is it that you want. I really want a pizza that has half cheese on it, mushrooms on the whole thing, and pepperoni on half. And I would like it delivered from here, this organization, Pizza Hut or whatever, and I want it delivered by 6 p.m. The other person has the responsibility to respond to you, and it's not out of fear. Now, normally we make relationships out of fear. Here, go do this. And then someone's already overloaded with their work and they say yes because they don't want to tell their leader no. So they put something else falls to the wayside and then they go and do this, but they're feeling frantic. So the second part of the 4th question is to say, do you have a whole yes to that, Debra? Do you have a whole yes to those details? And I'd be like, yeah, that's totally good. I can do that. And then let's say my dog runs out into the street right before I'm about to order the pizza and go pick it up for you, and I can't get to it. I tell you right away before the time is due, as soon as I know, hey, I promised you I'd get you the pizza by 6. I've had an issue. I'm going to get it to you by 6:30. Okay, beautiful. I don't have to tell you all the reasons why. Then the third thing is in impeccability and taking responsibility instead of accountability is to say, I broke trust with you. Is there anything else I need to do to clean up because I didn't follow through with you without blame or shame? Because we want to build this clear trust. And you might be like, no, you've never had, this is the first time. Totally. It's okay. Or you might be like, you know what? I've noticed this is a pattern that you continue to be late and I want to get curious what's going on for you. Is there something else going on in your life? Is there something that you're afraid to tell me? Is it like, let's have a conversation around it so that we're building impeccable, responsible, conversational win-wins instead of do this, and then someone's overwhelmed and they don't have an opportunity to reply to it because of fear. So this is just a tiny, tiny, tiny important radical shift in conscious leadership, right?
So when you look at the future of conscious leadership, and this is a concept that, how long has conscious leadership been around? Like when did it get coined and started? Do you remember?
I want to say about, let's see, how long have I been doing this? 12 years ago, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a pretty recent
Yeah.
concept, but it's one that is fast growing. So, but we combine that with, we always have a changing work environment, and for a lot of people, whether that's sort of their perspective toward how they address work, what they want out of work, trying to find more balance. Maybe it's working hybrid or remote, or teams have flat communication now, it's matrixed, it's all those things. It's just, when you look at sort of the future of work, what is conscious leadership? What is the future of conscious leadership in sort of the evolving workforce?
That's interesting. So when I think about this work, I think about the younger generation. Like, I teach this work at Vanderbilt, and these young ones, I couldn't be more excited to be with them, because they get these tools in a heartbeat, and they grab onto it and they take them and they use the tool to look at the result that they have and how they're responsible for unconsciously for creating this result. And they want to learn and take a step to change that result. And I'm like, holy cow. Like, if these young ones can do this and they step into the workforce being responsible and not blaming themselves or someone else, and learning, like, we want to build learning cultures, learning companies, right? Can we be ultimate learners around everything instead of a blame, shame, drama? I am super excited that these young ones get it. And I tell my leaders, I'm like, listen, these young ones are coming up and they are aware and they want to learn, and you want to hire them because they get this. They get it very quickly. So I say, infusing and playing with these tools with each other, have a book club on the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, hire someone to teach you, hire a coach, practice it by yourself, practice it with your people, practice learning together of how to be aware. Because if we are unaware 96 to 98% of the time, we're going to continue to struggle trying to get a different result because we're not thinking, we're not getting new perspectives. So I think we're in a time right now where people are sad. We've just come through 5 years of suffering, right? The pandemic, race issues, presidential issues, and here we are, another election coming up. So how can we really stop suffering, take responsibility to choose if I want to have joy, what does that mean for me? What do I want to believe? How do I want to think? How can I hear people? Because when we're conscious, we're open to hearing people without defense. So we can learn from each other. When we're unconscious, we're not open to hearing people. Our defenses are up. So when I think about companies trying to practice this work, we're going to get through our meetings more quickly because we're going to hear each other more. We're going to stop wasting time having the same talk and conversation at the same meeting over and over again. How many times do I hear that? We're going to make impeccable agreements so we know who's doing what by when, so we don't have to keep checking on someone, and we can do what we're supposed to be doing, like our thing that we're supposed to be called to. We're going to be building better communication. We're going to be building trust. I mean, it's such a beautiful thing. So I'm hoping that we can start to bring this in more organizations so that we can change people's lives. That's what's happened. It's in my world, when I've done it, people's lives change. Their relationships with their spouses, their relationships with their kids, their relationships with their teams, everything changes. We talk about a culture change in an organization. This is the only way we can change our culture, is everyone has to take responsibility for being the change. Yeah.
Beautifully said. Well, this has been awesome, Debra. I love this conversation. I could do this for hours on this topic with you. When people are trying to learn more about what you do in conscious leadership and all those different things, what's the best way for them to find out more or get a hold of you?
Yeah, beautiful. So my email is Debra, Debra, Debra at Sunderland, Sunderland, coaching.com, or my website, which is sunderlandcoaching.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll point them to that, and we will also put that in the show notes so people can click directly to it. So thanks so much, Debra. It was awesome talking with you today.
Thank you so much. I love it.
Hey there, amazing leaders. If you found value in our podcast, we'd be incredibly grateful if you could just take 10 seconds to leave us a 5-star review. Your support means the world to us and helps us reach more people who can benefit from our content. So go ahead and spread the love by leaving a review right now. Thank you so much.